Welcome to this explainer. We're jumping right in today to move past the simplistic, kind of watered down historical myths you might remember from school. And we're going to unpack the messy, honestly shocking reality of Nathaniel Bacon's 1676 uprising. We hear about it a lot, but the actual deep down reasons why Bacon rebelled, they are far darker and way more fascinating than just a simple frontier dispute. So let's dive right into it. We have to start by investigating a truly bizarre historical mystery. I mean, think about it. How does a localized, seemingly minor frontier argument over pigs, literally pigs, somehow escalate into a full-blown civil war that nearly destroyed the entire Virginia colony? It sounds completely absurd on the surface, right? But the sequence of events is just incredible. Here's how that deadly chain reaction actually kicked off. The initial spark was lit in 1675. Dogue Indians took some pigs from Thomas Matthews' plantation to settle an unpaid trading debt. Now, obviously, this wasn't just a simple property dispute. It instantly set off this deadly tit-for-tat chain reaction of retaliatory violence back and forth along the Virginia frontier between the colonists and the local tribes. And this situation just quickly spiraled totally out of control. The Virginia militia went out responding to the initial unrest, and in the chaos, they mistakenly killed friendly Susquehannock Indians. The death toll was 14. Now, 14 might seem like a small number in the grand scheme of war, but that specific mistake completely shattered the fragile peace in the region. The Susquehannocks naturally retaliated, which absolutely terrified the frontier colonists. Almost overnight, they felt isolated, deeply vulnerable, and completely unprotected by their own government. But look, these frontier skirmishes, they were really just a match being dropped into a massive socioeconomic powder keg. Everyday Virginians were already desperate, way before a single arrow was ever fired. Just imagine trying to survive this compounding misery. You've got rock-bottom tobacco prices totally wiping out your income, extreme weather destroying your crops, incredibly harsh English shipping restrictions choking off trade, and on top of it all, crushing local taxes. So yes, the frontier folks were terrified of attacks, but they were also broke, starving, and absolutely furious at their leaders. When you think about the geographic divide at play here, you can really start to visualize the crushing anxiety of these struggling farmers. Out there on the far edges of the colony, right up against indigenous lands, they felt a million miles away from the safety, the security, and the immense, comfortable wealth of the elite, who were just sitting back in Jamestown calling the shots. And that mounting fear and resentment exposed a stark contrast in leadership, which brings us to the core philosophical clash of the entire rebellion. On one side, you have Governor William Berkeley. He wanted to build defensive frontier forts and maintain these really delicate alliances with tributary native groups. On the other side, Nathaniel Bacon steps up. He didn't want defense at all. He demanded an aggressive, total war to eradicate indigenous tribes and just seize their lands entirely. Now, to be fair, Governor Berkeley's strategy of compromise wasn't exactly selfless. Berkeley and his incredibly wealthy inner circle, the elite class that totally controlled the colonial government, well, they maintained a highly lucrative monopoly on the beaver trade with local Native Americans. They were absolutely desperate to protect this profitable network. And that is exactly why they refused to sanction a full-scale war that would disrupt their own private business interests. So why did Bacon actually start this rebellion? Here is the crucial truth, the real game changer. He was not a poor, struggling frontier farmer, not even close. Bacon was a wealthy, charismatic newcomer, and incredibly, get this, he was Berkeley's own cousin by marriage. He channeled the populist rage of the frontier strictly because he was furious about being excluded from those profitable inner-circle trade monopolies. When Berkeley denied him a military commission to fight the Native Americans, Bacon basically decided, fine, I'll harness the frontier's anger to take the power and the profits for myself. Bacon's fierce personal ambition fueled this chaotic, incredibly rapid-fire escalation throughout 1676. The timeline is staggering. In early June, Bacon is actually captured and apologizes to Berkeley on bended knee. It looks like it's over. But by late June, he's back at the State House with 500 armed men. By July, Berkeley officially declares him a rebel, and this whole thing rapidly culminates in September 1676 when Bacon and his forces violently burn Jamestown to the ground. Bacon was honestly a master at rallying the masses to his personal cause. In his famed Declaration of the People, he authenticated the frontier's frustrations perfectly to justify his massive power grab. He directly, publicly accused Berkeley of assuming monopoly of the beaver trade, basically arguing that the governor was prioritizing his own private profits over the colonists' physical safety. It was a very powerful message. And he didn't stop there. He totally weaponized the severe economic miseries of the poor, declaring that Berkeley had raised unjust taxes upon the commonalty merely to advance his private favorites. It was a brilliant, highly manipulative move. He took his own elite grievance of being left out of the wealthy inner circle, and he flawlessly aligned it with the very real, everyday survival struggles of the overtaxed commoners. All of this incredible political friction climaxed in a legendary, tense showdown right outside the Jamestown State House. During this standoff, the 70-year-old Governor Berkeley famously bared his chest, literally ripping his shirt open, and dared Bacon to shoot him dead right there. Bacon refused, but his mob essentially held the assembly hostage until Berkeley finally caved, resulting in Bacon seizing official military control of the colony. Once he was actually in power, Bacon's campaign against the indigenous tribes was utterly devastating and treacherous. His strategy was basically a brutally simple, cold-blooded calculation. First, he persuaded the Occaneechi tribe to attack the Susquehannocks. Second, he turned around, betrayed, and slaughtered those same Occaneechis to steal their beaver pelts. Third, he relentlessly pursued and enslaved members of the Pamunkey tribe, who, mind you, were actually some of the colonial government's closest and longest-standing allies. It was a completely ruthless power and land grab. As the Civil War dragged on, both leaders grew extremely desperate for troops, which led to a really fascinating dynamic. Governor Berkeley issued a proclamation promising freedom to any enslaved people or indentured servants of the rebels, as long as they joined his loyalist army. But not to be outdone, Bacon just issued his own rival proclamation, offering liberty to indentured or enslaved individuals belonging to loyalists if they joined his rebel cause. It was a total race for manpower. But then, just as Bacon seemed totally victorious after literally burning the capital to ashes, the uprising abruptly falls apart. In October of 1676, Nathaniel Bacon suddenly dies. And not in some blaze of battlefield glory either. He died of dysentery and a severe lice infestation. It was a remarkably unglamorous end for the fiery rebel leader. And without his charismatic leadership holding that very fragile coalition together, his forces faltered. Berkeley quickly swooped back in, regained control, and ultimately hanged 23 of the rebel leaders. While the rebellion ultimately failed to permanently overthrow the colonial government, it left behind a profoundly dark legacy. It drastically accelerated Native American land loss in Virginia, and it essentially proved to the ruling elite that cooperative government policies with indigenous tribes were officially a thing of the past. The frontier demanded unchecked aggression, and future governors largely complied just to prevent another uprising. But perhaps the biggest, most enduring, and tragic takeaway from this explainer is the haunting question that absolutely terrified the colonial elite in the aftermath. You see, Bacon's rebellion proved that poor whites, indentured servants, and enslaved black people could successfully unite to overthrow the ruling class. So what would prevent them from uniting again? Many historians argue this very fear directly accelerated Virginia's transition toward a permanent, brutal system of racial slavery, a system intentionally designed to divide the lower classes forever. It's a deeply sobering reminder of how elite self-interest can completely reshape the foundation of a society.